The Mishnah has been, we're just recapitulating the Mishnah.
Okay.
It's completely Ozzy's fault.
How
you?
And it's on the recording now, so we have.
How you Mahalkid Badera? So you had 6 people walking on the street. One fellow shows up next to them. Maybe he looks a little hazy, maybe it's a little foggy. Amar Echad Beino. Amar Echad man already knows it. She said, Ploni. One guy says, "Oh, I'll be done. I'll be a Nazir." If this is Ruben, Echad Amar already knows it. Shane's a Ploni. The guy says, "I'll be a Nazir." The way Tosfos type, she said, if it's Shimon, already a Nazir, She Echad Mikem Nazir. Third guy says, I'm a Nazir. One of you is a Nazir. Shane. The fourth guy says, Shein Echad Mikem Nazir. If neither of you are a Nazir. Fifth guy says, Shneichem Nazirim, I'll be a Nazir. Both of you, both of the first 2 guys are Nazir. Sixth guy says, Shekolchem Nazirim, I'll be a Nazir. All you are Nazir. So they can't all be right. I don't care. Bishavayomim, Pax on all of you. Kula Nazir, and you're all Nazir. Hekdesh Tos is Hekdesh, Nazir Tos is Nazir. I don't care. You said already Nazir, you're done. Ve'esolom says, no, the only one's a Nazir is the one who got it right. What do you mean? Then it should be Elavishini Skaimudvar. That's the Gemara. Rabbi Tarfon me'enachem Nazir. We need to Nazir Sal Afla, says Rabbi Tarfon, it has to be crystal clear. None of them are Nazir. See Alachoev, the mysterious stranger, jumps backward and runs away. We'll never figure out who he was. Who was that masked man? Ain't Nazir, so then nobody's a Nazir, according to this Tana, whoever it is. Rabbi Shimon says, well, maybe it was like what they said. Maybe it was Reuben, maybe it was Shimon. They should say, well, if it was like I said, already Nazir Chover, then I'll be a Nazir Chover, an obligatory Nazir because of what I said. And if not, I'll make myself a Nazir anyway. I'll volunteer Nazirus otherwise, if any Nazir Nadav, and this way he'll be able to bring Kabbalah. Says the Gemara Mishnah Stamid Rav, might have a Nazir. What do you mean, Beis Hillel? That if the guy didn't get it right, he's a Nazir. Show me if he got it right. So I'm you the let's teach it. Mishnah Sky with Rav. So Bayamar, Don the Amar, the Bay says no. The Mishalani Sky with Rav is an alternative case. It's where he changed his tune. Toka de Dibo, instead of saying I'll be a Nazir if it's Ruvain, he said I'll be a Nazir if it's not Ruvain. And what do you know? It turned out it wasn't Ruvain. And Mylon is Sky with Rav. And what do you mean? It didn't happen like he said. It didn't happen like the first thing he said that it was Ruvain. It happened like the second thing that he said that he wasn't Ruvain. And it teaches us the principle. Toka de Dibo Kadimo Dami, and we follow his second formulation. Okay.
So which guy is a Nazir? The one who said that's Reuben?
The one who said that's not Reuben, and then it turned out not to be Reuben. He said that's I'll be a Nazir if it's Reuben. No, I changed my mind. I'll be a Nazir if it's not Reuben. And then, even though he changed his mind, we follow his second formulation because he changed his mind within 2 seconds. So therefore, so we follow the second formulation. What do you know? It turns out not to be Reuben, so he's a Nazir. That's the second explanation. The first explanation is like you said. No, he ran away in the last case. We're talking about the first case. Now we're up to the last case. You're jumping the gun. You know, right? You're always ahead of us. So now he jumped backward and disappeared into the air, into the thin air. And everyone says, who was that masked man? It's a famous movie made about this. It was called The Seventh Man. So so he jumps backward, and we don't know who he was. So one Tana, not Rabbi Shimon, that the first Tana before Rabbi Shimon at the end of the Mishnah says he's not even a suffix Nazir. He's a Gornish, not a suffix Nazir. So who is that? Who's now we don't want to know who the mysterious masked stranger was anymore. Now we want to know who's the mysterious masked Tana. Who's this Tana who says he's not a Nazir at all? Time Mishum der Silachov. So then the implication is if we were able to grab him and grab off his mask, and what do you know? It turns out it is Reuven. So then the first guy who said I'm a Nazir if it's Reuven would be a Nazir. But now that we don't know who he is, maybe he was Reuven, but we don't know. So now he's not even a suffix Nazir. He's not a Nazir at all. Somebody, who is this going like? Okay, Ilema, who? Wow, we finished the first step. So Ilema Rabbi Tarfon, we say it's Rabbi Tarfon. Miyavi Nazir. Rabbi Tarfon wouldn't hold that he was a Nazir, even if we were able to run after him, grab off the mask, and discover the whole Scooby-Doo family there, and they grab the guy and they discover that it's really Reuven. So they, according to Rabbi Tarfon, since at the time that he took the Neder Nazivah, so we had no idea who he was, he still wouldn't be a Nazir. Given the B'shait Nazir lo yadi ploni who below, Nicola Lanizirus. You have a brisa that explicates Rabbi Tarfon's shita better than we've explicated, or more thoroughly than we've explicated it in any Mishnah. So that's why we're quoting the brisa. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Tarfon Ein Echad Mehem Nazir. We already know that Rabbi Tarfon is of the opinion that none of them are a Nazir. We have that in our Mishnah, that none of them are a Nazir. But here in the brisa, we give the explanation behind Rabbi Tarfon. The fi shelo nasna nazirus elul hafla. Nazirus requires absolute clarity. Requires clarity. Hafla. So here, there's no clarity at the time he made his neder that this masked stranger was really moving. Ella, this is going like Rabbi Yehuda decree. Rabbi Yehuda regarding the case where I have bundles of something, bundles, bushels of wheat, whatever it is, that's inside of a storage facility. Who the Tanya, and he says that if I'm not sure that the facts were as I had stipulated, then I'm not a Nazir at all. Not a Nazir at all. It wouldn't even go like about Beis Hillel, because Beis Hillel now in Mishnah says that the one whose words are correct would be a Nazir. If I'm not able to clarify if the words were correct, so the implication is, that's what Tosta says over here, the implication is that he would be a Suffolk Nazir at least, and he would have to at least observe Nazirus Misafek. But the Tana at the end of our Mishnah says he's not a Nazir at all if I can't clarify with the facts. So that must be Rabbi Yehuda decree. The Tanya, and we pass him like Rabbi Yehuda decree. So this is like, an important conclusion, because then this is different from the Shita Beis Hillel. What?
This case.
It was, in fact, word earlier. You're 100% correct. We learned this in Maseches Nedarim, believe it or not. Hareini Nazir, so you're remembering way back there. Hareini Nazir Amanas, but we also have it earlier on in this Masechta in Daf Ches. Hareini Nazir Amanas Shebekriya Zem Me'akor. Person says, I'll be a Nazir if in this storage shack there's 100 cores of wheat for halak shomatsu shenigna she'avad. Then he discovers that it was all stolen or it was all lost. He doesn't know if it was 100 core at the time that he made his neder or not. So Rabbi Shimon says we have to worry that maybe it was 100 core oser. So therefore he has to act like a nazir, at least in Safek. Rabbi Yehuda matir, and Rabbi Yehuda says no. Safek nazirus lekula. That's how we paskin the halacha. We paskin Safek nazirus lekula. We paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Shimon saber, and Rabbi Shimon says no. Kivan dilo nignav. We have to worry. Maybe there were 100 bushels in there. Dilma havu core is a very large measure of bushels. Dilma havu be mea core, havi nazir, and he really is a nazir. So hashtanami havi nazir. So therefore he has to act as a nazir because safek nazirus the chumas, says Rabbi Shimon. And here as well, Rabbi Shimon holds in our Mishnah. Kivan also the command v'yadin deploni hava. If we would have run after this guy and pulled off the mask, or found that, been able to take a good look at him, maybe we would have discovered that it's Reuven or Shimon, as the case may be. And then Havi Nazir, and then whoever said it was Reuven or Shimon would be a Nazir, or whoever said it wasn't Reuven, if it turned out not to be Reuven, would be a Nazir. Hashtanami Havi Nazir, so therefore he has to be a Nazir, l'chumra, and the way in which he can bring korbanos is to say that if I'm a Nazir because of this, here's my korban, and if not, I'll be a Nazir voluntarily, otherwise, and bring the korban that way, and that way at least he'll be able to complete his Nazirus. Masni says in the next Mishnah.
Be possible because you would have to bring a chatas also.
Yes.
And you can't bring a chatas misafek.
Yes, but you could bring a chatas mivadai. So hivadai is going to be obligated either because of the first situation or because he's volunteering in his Nazirus anyway. He says it tonight. He says, either way, I'll be obligated. Either I'll be obligated because it was Reuven, or I'll be obligated because I'm going to volunteer in the Nazirus anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Mishnah, next Mishnah says, Ras HaKoi. You saw a koi. What's a koi? I don't know. Nobody knows what a koi is. Maybe it's a crossbreed between a deer and a goat. Maybe it's some other very unique animal. Different opinions what a koi is, but we don't know whether it's really something that we would define as a chaya, as a behema, as something that's neither a chaya or a behema, something that's both a chaya and a behema. We don't know. The Amar, so the person says, what does he say? He says, Hareini Nazir Shizachaya. I'm a Nazir that this is a Chaya. Hareini Nazir Shizayno Chaya. I'm a Nazir if it's not a Chaya. Hareini Nazir, and third guy, then he says, Hareini Nazir Shizay Behema. Okay, I'll be a Nazir, it's a Behema. And then he says, so you know what? Hareini Nazir Shane's a Behema. I'll be a Nazir if it's not a Behema. Then he says, Hareini Nazir, I'll be a Nazir. I am a Nazir. Shizay Chaya U Behema. Based on this being a Chaya and a Behema. Then he says, very schizophrenic person. Hareini Nazir, she'ein ze lo chaya v'lo behema. Then he says, I'm a Nazir that this is not a chaya, not a behema. Well, we're going to see it. We're going to see in the Gemara. It could be one person who's saying all this. Hareini Nazir she'echan mikem Nazir. Now he switches to his multiple personality syndrome. Says Hareini Nazir that one of you guys that is a Nazir. Hareini Nazir she'ein echan mikem Nazir. I'm a Nazir that none of you guys are Nazir. Hareini Nazir, yeah. Well, I'm a Nazir shekulchem Nazirin, that you're all Nazirin. Hareini kulan Nazirin, so all of them are Nazirin. It could be multiple people, but the Gemara is going to say that it could also be one person. Now, interestingly, the Mefarish here, whom we sometimes call Rashi, says that this whole Mishnah presumably is a shloke hilchasa. That it's going like Beis Shammai, who says that we don't really care what the circumstances are. Once a person says Hareini Nazir, so then even if what they say is wrong, we say Hekdesh Patos and Naziris Patos have Naziris, and therefore he's going to be a Nazir anyway, even if he gets it, whether he gets it right or whether he gets it wrong. However, the Rambam paskins like this Mishnah. So it's a Shaila, what is the Rambam paskin like this Mishnah? We presumably wouldn't paskin like Beis Shammai. So very fascinating explanation that the Meforshim on the Rambam give, and that is that they say that all of these people are correct. All these people are correct, or at least those who have the first six formulations. That a koi on some measure is sometimes, if you look at the Mishnah, there's a whole parak about this in Mishnayos Bikurim. Sometimes the koi is treated as a behema. Sometimes the koi is treated as a chaya. Sometimes the koi is treated as both a behema and a chaya. Sometimes the koi is treated as neither a behema or a chaya. So therefore, the Rambam says they're all correct. They're all correct. So the Nazirim, because they're all correct. Because otherwise, the Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda, that Safek and Zivas Lakula, so if it would be a Safek, so then you wouldn't be a Nazir. The Rambam paskins that these people are Nazirim because they're all correct on some measure. So Gemara says Tani Chada the Tisha Nazirim. So V'tanya Idach Tesha Nazirius. That there's one version of understanding this mission. It says we're talking about 9 different people that all would become Nazirim. And another version of this mission that says, no, it's 9 different formulations of one person. So Bishlam, I understand the first formulation. That's what everybody here had been assuming. Tisha Nazirin, you go on the Abigavri, Tzvei, the Ispis, Be'azobei, that you have the different people walking along, and each one is saying a different formulation about this koi, whether it's a chaya or behema, both, neither, and so forth. Elatation Nazirios l'chad gava. But how in the world could you have one person who's making all these formulations? I understand the first 6 cases. I could have one person who says, "Oh yeah, I'm a Nazir," so he's covering his bases. I'm a Nazir, it's a chayim, a Nazir, it's not a chayim, a Nazir, it's a behema, a Nazir, it's not a behema, a Nazir. I can understand one person saying all of those first 6. Bishlam is shis mishkachas la behema chaya, both behema and chaya, and their negatives. Kidditanan might be an extra word over here. Aval tlas heichem mishkachas la. But the last 3 cases, how do you find? How does that come? How do you have one person is talking about like other people when it's all talking about himself? Nowadays, really, if you're a psychologist nowadays or whatever, it's not a kasha at all. But Amar Sheshis can go on to Amar, so he says it's because it's like the person says, Hareini Nazir, I'm a Nazir. B'chol Naziris hakol alai. And all of these Naziris are going to be incumbent upon me. So you take a look at the Tosfos over here. He says like this, that he finds 9 different people who made these formulations. Okay, this is like the simplest way to understand the maskana of the Gemara. You come along, you see 9 people who made these formulations, and then you say about those 9 people, I'm taking upon myself the Nazirus that all nine of you have. So then the person, if we would assume that Suffolk Nazirus the Chumrah, so then the person is a Suffolk Nazir based on all of them, and he would have to act as a Nazir or make the tikkun. If we assume like Rabbi Shimon, that Rabbi Shimon would say, if I'm a Nazir Chova, based on any one of these nine, and then I'm going to bring, each one of my sets of behemoths for each nine of those chovos, and otherwise I'll volunteer Nazir, a Nazir Nidaba, that I'll volunteer to be a Nazir for other reasons and bring the korbanos on that basis.
And
That's
he has
how
to
the
bring, and he's Nazir for 9.
Yeah, 9 times. They have to
Nine
bring nine.
times.
That's right. That's right. To be nine, he have to be 9 times a Nazir, right? Yeah. Okay. Good. The way the Mefarish explains, it could be that nobody necessarily took upon themselves of this, but the person himself is saying, I'm taking upon myself every single version that could exist of how a person could be a Nazir in this situation. I'm taking upon myself all 9 of these formulations that could occur with different sets of people. That's another way that it could come about. Okay. Good.
I don't know how to be Shammai.
Yeah, I'll add that the Mefarish explains also that the whole Mishnah, we said that the Mishnah could be explained like Beis Shammai. The Mishnah could be explained along the lines of that the person is a Vadai Nazir because a Koi really is a Behemoth, really is a Chaya, really is all of these other things in some fashion. The Mefarish here wants to say the Mishnah is going like Beis Hillel, and Beis Hillel says that only B'tos Hekdesh does a person not become a Nazir. But here, if it's a Suffolk Hekdesh in the sense that it's something we'll never be able to clarify, because even if I have the animal in front of me, the Chachamim never clarified whether a koi is a behemoth or a chai or so forth, that Beis Hillel would agree that the person would be a Nazir, because Beis Hillel holds that a Suffolk Nazir is considered to be a Nazir. And that's why the case of Hirsia La'achorov, when we said the person is not a Nazir, we explained that it's not going according to Beis Hillel, but rather it's going according to Rabbi Yehuda, because Beis Hillel holds that a Suffolk Nazir would be a Nazir, and the Mishnah is going according to them. But we hold that a Suffolk Nazir is Lakula. So the Rambam just says, look, I have a standalone Mishnah. We're going to assume it's Lahalacha. So he explains, so the way in which the Meforshim of the Rambam explain is that it's not based on Suffolk, it's based on Vadai, that the Koi is Vadai in some way, a Chai is Vadai in some way, Behem, and so forth. Okay, now Duran Alak Beis Shammai.
It is a Koi is both.
Shlosha Minin Asurim bin Nazir. There are 3 things that a Nazir is not allowed to have. 3 things a Nazir is not allowed to have. What are the 3 things that a Nazir is not allowed to have? Hatuma is not allowed to become Tameh, not allowed to go to a cemetery, come into contact with a corpse. Vatiglaka is not allowed to cut his hair. Yosim and a Geffen, he's not allowed to have any products of the vine. Products of the vine means he can't drink wine, he can't eat grapes,
Grape juice.
and so forth.
Grape skin.
Yes. Yosim and a Geffen, it's stopping Zem. And any products of the vine combined with each other for a kazayas. If he eats a little bit of the grape, a little bit of the grape skin, a little bit of the pips inside of the grapes, and they combine together, that also causes him to be chayav. In chayav, ad she yochal, and he's only chayav ad she yochal min hanavim kazayas. It has to be a shear of a kazayas. Once he's eating, the prohibited thing is going to be chayav, malchus, whatever. It's going to require eating a kazayas. Next page. Mishnah Rishona, the first version of the Mishnah says, Omeris, back over here, Mishnah Rishona, okay, so the back takes it out up until Mishnah Chona, no, he takes out the word Omeris, okay. Mishnah Rishona, so Mishnah Rishona says, Achi Yishte Revius Yayin. Says up until he drinks, if he's drinking the wine, he has to drink a Revius. Rabbi Kiva Omer, no. Afilu shara pito b'yayin, even if he soaked the his bread with wine and b'yesh b'kadei l'tzaref kizayis, and that you can put together the bread and the wine that is soaked in, that it all occupies a volume of a kizayis, then he'd be chayiv. This is like the idea of hetem mitzaref le'isr, and we're going to, that's a Yoredeya concept, but it's derived from Nida, from Nazir. You have to figure out, is that a local din in Nazir, that the wine itself is usher, but it can combine together with the bread that it's soaked into in order to have a shear that the Nazir is going to be chayav for. So that's a special din, a mishras, that we're going to discuss further in the Gemara. And the person is chayav for drinking the wine. That would be one chiyuv, and he get another chiyuv for another culpability for eating the grapes. Or if he ate the chatzon, what are the chatzonim? It's machlokis, whether the chatzonim are the outer skin, or whether it's the inside pips. We're going, so we'll see if we assume it's the pips, sometimes called pips. The zogim b'fnei atzman, and the zogim, which also machlokis, which one it is. So we'll see that we generally assume the zogim are the skins, so you'd be chayav for that. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, and some say this is a more stringent shita. It sounds a little bit more lenient, but it's actually more stringent in one way as well. He says, "Ein chayiv, if it's a question of eating the skins and the pips, you have to do it together. You have to have the shnei chatzonim, 2 pips and the skin together. So while it sounds like a kula, you're not going to be chayiv for only eating a chatzonim or only eating a zogim, even if they add up to a kizayis. But it's also a chumrah, because he holds the shnei chatzonim v'zag in connection with one grape is considered like a beria. So it's considered like a complete entity. So even if it's less than a kazayas, you'd be chayav. Elohein in that case. Elohein chatzanim, elohein zogim. So which are the chatzanim, which are the zogim? So hachatzanim, elo achitzonim. So the first shita, which is Rabbi Yehuda, whom we don't hold like, so don't get confused over this. Says hachatzanim, elo achitzonim. Hachatzanim are the outer skins. The zogim, elo pnim, and the zogim are the pips on the inside. That can be sort of replanted to make new grapes. Tibe Rabbi Yehuda, that's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, no. Shelo Tite says, he says that's not correct. It's the other way around. Gezuk Shebehema. It's like when you have a bell that you put around the neck of an animal to keep track of the animal. Achitzon zug, the outer part, that would be like in our case, it would be the grape skin. That's the zug, that's the bell. But panimi, the inner part, is the inbol, that's the clapper. So the clapper is the chatzanim. Those are the little pips that are inside of the grape. Okay, so the Gemara says, Shlosha minin asurim minazar tumah v'chulei, was just quoting from the Mishnah here. Okay, hayotzi min hagefen in. So it sounds like that which comes out of the vine is going to be prohibited for the nazir, but the gefen atzmo lo, but not the vine itself, not the branches of the vine. If a nazir is really starving or nuts, and he starts eating the branches of the vine, so he said that's okay. Masnisen, I mean, like what? No, grape leaves might. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. So masnisen deloke, the leaves are maybe a little bit of a different story, because but we'll see. Masnisen deloke Rabbi Eliezer. So we say, well, that would be not like Rabbi Eliezer, because as according to Rabbi Eliezer, even the leaves are a problem. The Tanya, but that's the implication that the leaves would be the leaves would be okay. Well, we'll see. There are different opinions. We're going to get to it. There are 2 different approaches as to what's usher, how far we extend the Yisra of the Nazir. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, afilu alin v'lulavin b'mashma. Rabbi Eliezer says even alin and lulavin, even the leaves and the lulavin are sort of like the soft branches, would be included in the prohibition. Ika de amila asepa. So some have this discussion going on at the Sefer of our Mishnah. What is the Sefer of our Mishnah? The Sefer of our Mishnah says, Eino chayev, ela ad sheyochel min hanavim kizayis, min hanavim in, me'agefen atzmo lo. It sounds like the chiyuv, like Malchus, is only going to be for grapes, but not from the branches. Maslisin deloka Rabbi Eliezer. So that's when we say that the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Eliezer, the Tanya, because Rabbi Eliezer says, what? He says, Omer afilu alin v'lulavin b'mashma, then included in the prohibition is even alin, even the leaves, and even lulavin, again, we says is sort of soft branches. Okay, fine. because Hayotze min hagefen, which is the Resha, might have implied even leaves and soft branches. So that's why, according to the second version, the diuk is much better coming from the Seifa, because the Seifa says more explicitly, you're only chayiv until you eat the grapes, until you eat something which is mamish edible. So that's a better way to be medayik, but not the leaves and the soft branches. So what are they arguing about? When I was younger, I would always say my kamiflagi, but then somebody bought me a Steinsaltz, and I was, forever changed. So you'll forgive me for that. Rabbi Eliezer Darish Ribuye Umiyuti. Rabbi Eliezer Darshan said in terms of Riboy Umiyut, Rabbanan Darshi Klali Uprati. And the Rabbanan say you have to learn the pasuk like a Klal Uprat. So if it's a Riboy, obviously I'm going to include more. It's just sort of a general proposition. So then we always find the way to include less. So Rabbi Eliezer Darish Ribuye Umiyuti. It says, what does it say in the first pasuk? It says, Miyayin Mesheka Yazir. That's a meal. It's a miyat. It's only wine and intoxicating, the wine type beverages. Shaker here doesn't mean beer. It means, a type of wine, a stage of wine. So only that is going to be excluded. And then it has a general principle. It says, Mikol, the next pasuk says, Mikol asher yasem migefen hayayin. From everything that comes from the vine, that's a riba. Mikol asher yasem migefen hayayin riba. So miyat for riba. So if I have a miyut and then I have a riboy, and Rabbi Eliezer assumes that the next words, Michat Sanim Ve'adzag Lo Yochel, which also sounds like a meal, is there to teach me something else entirely. The din of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, that you need, if you're going to be chayev for eating the chatzanim and the zag, it has to be together, 2 chatzanim and 1 zag. So he doesn't read that as a limitation, as another meal. All that you have, according to him, is a meal and a riba, so you can end up being marbet like a lot. Riba hakol, my riba kol meili. Everything that comes from the vine is going to be usher. Since I started with a miyud, Eddie, we're going to have to grant a concession to exclude something. So what are we going to exclude? My miyek shabishta. So we're just going to be mamayet at the hard branches. The shabishta are the hard branches, as opposed to the lubin, which are the soft branches. It's only the hard branches. I mean, he's going to have very strong, teeth and jaws or whatever to chomp into a hard branch. But that's okay. We're not going to punish him for that. We might send him away, but we're not going to punish him. Rabban and Darshi Klali Uprati. The Chachamim say, no, the whole thing is Klal Uprat. You know how that works. We got a prat, we got a klal, then we got another prat. So the way that a klal, if I have a prat, then a klal, then a prat, it works very, very similarly to if I have a klal, then a prat, then a klal that I read about in Rabbi Yishmael Omer. The Gemara later on is going to give us like a slight, minute difference between when it's prat to klal or prat, but it's basically the same, very similar, and that's what we have here. Miyayin Mesheka Yazir, Miyayin Mesheka, I'm starting off with a prat. Mikol Asher Yasem Migefen Hayayin, everything that comes from the vine, that's a klal. And then I got my Mechatzanim Ve'adzag, that's a Chazaru prat. Okay, so prat to klal uprat is reads a lot like prat klal uprat to klal. Iatadan Elakain a prat. That in the end, I just include things that are similar to the prat. So my prat mefurish pri, psolis pri. In the prat, I have like the things which are the pre, like the grapes, the wine itself, and I have the psolis pre, like it talks about chometz yayin, the chometz shecha, like the vinegar that comes from the wine. That's psolis pre. So I'm going to include everything that's sort of in those categories. Ap kol pri, upsolis pre. So ima prat, and we'll see what that comes to include. That's going to be spelled out. Ima prat mefurish pri gomer. So I might think that since the prat really spells out things that are complete, so I've called pre-gomer. So therefore, everything would have to be 100% complete. So, like for example, if it was unripened, grape, maybe it would be excluded. I've called pre-gomer. So Amis imkain ma'aniach l'cha kasub b'mashmo shlo amru. So then I wouldn't have anything that I could possibly include through the prat to klal prat. If I have a general proposition here, which says Mikol Asher Yasem Migefen Hayayin, it's obviously coming to include more. So I must be including more than just a pre-gomor. So it would include, for example, a smadar, not smadar, but boser. Boser is a more advanced state of the grapes growth. And even though it's not completely ripened, but it's close to being ripened, so we would include that as well. The Rambam says Boser is included, Smadar is not included. Smadar is a very early stage of development, but Boser is a later stage of development, but still not a pre-gummer, that would be included. Okay,
What do we
because
call
otherwise,
those-
what is it that we didn't, include? What? I'm
What do
sorry?
we call those, unripened, little, unripened that are never going to ripen grapes?
Yeah, so
What-
so
what are those
that's what we're talking about. Those are like the Boser. The Boser are that they're not completely ripened, right? So imkain maniach lakar kafar kasav mashma shlomo anakim lakim biveshim aksivi. What are you going to include? You're going to include not only the moist grapes, but also the dry grapes. But it says v'anashim in the list of pratim, it says v'chol mishras anavim lo yishteh v'anavim lakim biveshim lo yochel. Included in the prat are both the moist and the dry grapes. Like Sivi, Yain Mechometz says at the beginning of the pasuk, Miyain Meshecha Yazeh Chometz Yain Mechometz Shecha Lo Yishteh. So Yain Mechometz are explicitly written in the psukim with respect to the pratim, the specific items. Like Sivi, Hain Alecha Ladun Galoshin Achon Elech Galoshin Rishon. Rather, it must be that I'm including also psolis pri. I'm also including things that are not 100%. Mayaka Shesofino Larabas Kodover Matam Maloma Mechatzonim Be'adzog. So why then do I need chatzanim be'adzag if I'm including more things? So that's to teach me, no, the fact that I'm not including everything, that's because I have a prat at the end. Lama lacha, that I can only follow this principle of prat to klal prat, but limiting things ke'ena prat, if I have a limitation at the end. If I'm starting with a prat, then I have a klal, I need another prat at the end. Lama lacha komakom shetamotze prat to klal, iyata rashay lamashkel laduna ke'ena prat. I can only say that everything has to be similar to the prat, and I'm not going to include like everything, like the alin and the ulavin as well. Elanasa klal mosaf ala prat. I'm just going to add everything into the klal. Ad sheyiprot lecha hakasav kederach she parat lecha benazir. Until such time as I have a prat at the very end. The way this is the way that the chachamim are learning. Until I have a prat at the very end of mechatzonim be'adzag lo yochel, so that teaches me that it's okay for me to have this limitation. Okay, so what are the various limitations? So we're going to get into that, or what are the various things that I'm deriving from the limited category that's in the pasuk, where I say other things that are also similar to them will be included. So amar prat mefurish pri psolis pri. That just like the prat tells us things that are fruit and things that are like not perfect, I've called pre upsolis pre. So too, any pre upsolis pre, what are those things? What would I be including? So pre envy. So the pre for the pre part, I'm going to include that which I refer to as envy, meaning what? Meaning that these are grapes that are not. Will say that are not such a that are good. These are regular grapes. That's the envy. Those are the anavim. Solus pri. What's the solus pri that's in the pasuk? Ma'i. That's the chometz. That's the vinegar. Vinegar is already inferior. So I've called pri. So what am I including here? So here's where we're getting into what we're including. So guharki. What are guharki? So the Mefarish says guharki are like the inferior grapes. They are grapes, but you have like the big grapes, and then you have like these teeny tiny grapes. They are pre, but they're like the teeny tiny grapes that grow amongst the other grapes. Okay, so that's what it would be. That's the guharki. Okay, right. Okay. Now the Tosfos, 3 lines from the bottom, says the guharki is that's not what we're talking about. The guharki are the boser. They're the grapes that are never going to be 100% ripe, but they're close to being ripe. That's the guharki. So I've called the psolis pri mahi. When we say that the psolis pri, the inferior ones that are not quite the grape themselves, but something else. So just like chometz is included in the prohibition, so too the klal has us include more. What does it have us include? So Amar Rav Kahana. The suye anavim dichrin. Anavim dichrin means grapes that are kind of what we call sort of wormy grapes. That they've been infested a little bit by worms. They're a little bit eroded, what we call, male grapes. So they're not quite as fruitful. So that's what we're talking about. Anavim shehisliu, anavim that have begun to become a little bit wormy. Be'ad zag. What about the very last phrase that seems to be another category? It says be'ad zag, up until the zag. So that also seems to be an inclusive phrase. Not only the grape skins, but something else. So Rabina Lisuye Debena Benayim. That comes to include that there's sort of like a middle space between the pips and the skin from which you would produce like dregs. So that area of the grape would also be prohibited. Okay. So that's what we call the Bena Benayim. Okay. So Amamar. And the way in which the Mefarish had learned that Guhaki, well, the Yanavim Dakin, so I think the way that the other Mefarishim learn is that this case of where am I here in the Gemara, the Beina Beinayim could be understood as that the Yanavim Dakin. If I understand Guhaki to be both there, so then the Yanavim Dakin case is the Beina Beinayim case is talking about the Anavim Dakin, the small grapes between the big grapes. So Amamar Ima Mefurish Prigama Akol Prigamer. So Amaris, so he said that we had a Havamina that maybe it has to be complete grapes that not absolus at all. So Amaris again, if I'm Mahiniach Akasav Mashmo Shloamo. So he said, so what would not have been included? If everything is going to be a pre-gummer, it has to be solus pre as well. So anavim lacham iveshim aksibi. We said that anavim lacham iveshim are written in the pasuk. Yain mechometz aksibi. Vayin alekadadun kiloshen achon ela kiloshen rishon. Then it must be that I'm including a pre and solus pre, and additional categories of pre and solus pre. Me'achar shesofino. Including wormy grapes and grapes that are not completely ripe. So he says, so why then do I need mechatzanim be'adzog? Why is that not at the beginning? Why is it at the end? If I only wanted to include this category of beina benayim, so then I could have put mechatzanim adzog at the beginning. But the fact that I have one prat, one sort of a limited area, a limited restriction or specified category that's at the very end, that's lo malcha, that's to teach me that my ability to limit the prohibition altogether to ke'ena prat is only because I finished with a prat. Lo malcha kumakom shanta mosei prat klal yeta rashay lemosh kladuna ke'ena prat elen anasek la mosei prat. Otherwise, the klal would have included everything. Ashiyipot l'kal kasav derek shipart l'kal benazir. Until you actually have a limitation that you have, like we have with respect to the Nazir, which teaches us mechatzanim be'adzog, that we have a limited specified category at the end, and not just the prat followed by the cloud of kosh mikosh yasim migefen ayayin. In this way, I know that I treat the whole thing as ke'ena prat. I only include categories that are similar to that which is specified by the Torah, and not the ulin and the lovin, not the leaves and the soft branches. And we'll stop here. Okay.